Welcome to the Professor English podcast, where we don't just talk about English, we practice English. My name is Ryan, and I am your host. Today, we are going to practice using the phrasal verb come across as, which is different from my other come across video. As you probably know, most phrasal verbs have more than one meaning. Come across as means how something appears, how people see it, how people interpret something that they see. As usual, instead of giving you long explanations, let's just jump right in and practice. If you're not sure how to use it now, don't worry. After we practice using it together, you will be much more comfortable with this phrase. Before we begin, I just want to remind you that if you prefer some visual help with this exercise, you can always see the video version on my YouTube channel, Professor English ESL Class. Now, let's dive in and start practicing English. Here is a simple sentence in English. Try to repeat after me. Mary didn't complain about the price. Mary didn't complain. Mary didn't complain about the price. Okay, now we're going to use the phrase even though, and I have a video about how to use even though, but there's a link for it in the description. But if you don't remember or you're not sure, even though means doesn't matter, not important. So if we say, even though the dinner was expensive, that means it doesn't matter that the dinner was expensive. Mary didn't complain. So it's not important that the dinner was expensive. Mary didn't complain about the price. Mary didn't complain about the price, even though the dinner was expensive. Can you repeat that? Mary didn't complain about the price, even though the dinner was expensive. Let's make a why not complain question. Why not complain? Why not? Why didn't she? Why didn't she complain? Why didn't she complain about the price? Why didn't she complain about the price? Okay, here's the reason. She didn't want people to think that she was cheap. She didn't want people to think that she was cheap. She didn't complain about the price because she didn't want people to think that she was cheap. Can you repeat all of that? Can you say all of that? She didn't complain about the price because she didn't want people to think that she was cheap. Okay. Now, we can use come across here. We can say, because, if we say she didn't want to appear cheap, she didn't want people to see her this way. This means come across. She didn't want to come across as cheap. She didn't want people to see her this way. She didn't want, just repeat that. She didn't want to come across as cheap. She didn't want people to see her as a cheap person. She didn't want to appear cheap. She didn't want to come across as cheap. She didn't complain. She didn't complain about the price because she didn't want to come across as cheap. She didn't want to come across as cheap. She didn't want people seeing her like a cheap person. She's not. Maybe she is, but she didn't want people to see it. All right, fantastic job. Let's try another example. John didn't lose his temper. John didn't lose his temper. Now let's do an even though, which means doesn't matter, not important. Even though he was extremely angry, he didn't lose his temper. Doesn't matter he was extremely angry. He did not lose his temper. He did not show his anger. Even though he was extremely angry, he didn't lose his temper. Can you make a why not lose temper question? Why not lose temper? Why didn't he lose his temper? Why didn't he? Why didn't he lose? Why didn't he lose his? Why didn't he? Why didn't he lose? Why didn't he lose his? Why didn't he lose his temper? Why didn't he lose his temper? Why didn't he lose his temper? Here is the reason. He didn't want people to think that he was unfriendly. He didn't lose his temper because he didn't want people to think that he was unfriendly. Can you repeat all of that? He didn't lose his temper because he didn't want people to think he was unfriendly. He didn't lose his temper because he didn't want people to think that he was unfriendly. He didn't lose his temper because he didn't want people to think he was unfriendly. He didn't lose his temper because he didn't want people to think that he was unfriendly. He didn't want to appear unfriendly. He didn't want that appearance from people. He didn't want other people to have this idea about him that he was unfriendly. He did not want to come across as unfriendly. He did not want to come across as unfriendly. He didn't lose his temper because he didn't want to come across as unfriendly. He didn't want people to think that about him. He didn't want to come across as unfriendly. Let's try to say the whole thing. He didn't lose his temper because he didn't want to come across as unfriendly. All right, super duper job. Let's try another example. But before we do, I just want to remind you that if you find these exercises helpful, please take a moment to subscribe to my channel so you won't miss the next lesson. And if you are watching this video on YouTube, please take a moment to press the like button. It helps my channel so much and lets me know that you want to see more fluency and listening comprehension exercises. Now, let's keep practicing English. People see Mary as unsociable. So when people see Mary, they think of somebody, she's not very sociable. She doesn't like to talk to people. She doesn't like to be around people. People see Mary as unsociable. People think that she is not very social. Now let's use come across. Mary comes across as unsociable. That means the same thing. Mary comes across as unsociable. That means when people meet her, they think she's not very social. Come across. That's how people see it. That's how people see you. Mary comes across as unsociable. Now let's do it doesn't matter, not important, even though she is very nice. Okay, it doesn't matter she's very nice. People still think she isn't social. Even though she's very nice, she comes across as unsociable. Even though she's very nice, she comes across as unsociable. Even though she is very nice, she comes across as unsociable. Let's make a why question. Why come across unsociable? Why does she? Why does she come across? Why does she come across as unsociable? Why does she come across as unsociable? And the reason is she is shy. She comes across as unsociable because she's shy. So it's not that she doesn't like to talk to people, it's just that she is a little bit afraid, I guess, to talk to people. Doesn't mean she doesn't like it. She's just uncomfortable. She comes across as very unsociable because she's shy. So people think that she's not very social. And the reason for that is because she's very shy, very quiet. All right, fantastic job. Let's try one more. People think John is rude. People think John is rude. This is what people see when they see John. They see a very rude person. Maybe he's not really, or maybe he is. I don't know. But what people see is that he's rude. That's his image. So we can say John comes across as rude. That's what people see. John comes across as rude. People see him as a rude person. Let's do a even though, it doesn't matter, phrase. Even though he's very considerate. Even doesn't matter he's very considerate. People think he's rude. Even though he's very considerate, he comes across as rude. Even though he's very considerate, he comes across as rude. Let's make a why come across rude question. Why come across rude? Why does he? Why does he? Why does he come across as rude? Come across as rude. Come across as. Come across as rude. Why does he come across as rude? Why does he come across as rude? The reason is he's very straightforward. That means he's very honest or very direct with people. Some people might think that's rude. He comes across as rude because he's very straightforward. He comes across as rude because he's very straightforward. Because he is. Because he's. Because he's. Because he is. Because he's very rude. Because he is very rude. Because he's very rude. He comes across, because he's very straightforward. Because he is very straightforward. Because he's very straightforward. He comes across as rude because he's very straightforward. All right, you did an amazing job today, and you learned some fantastic English. Congratulations! I knew you could do it. Remember that practice makes perfect, so you should repeat this exercise several times, not just so that you can remember how to use come across as, but also to improve your listening and your speaking skills. It's been really fun practicing English with you today, and I hope to see you again real soon. So don't forget to subscribe to my channel, and don't forget to press the like button. See you in the next video with more interesting words and phrases.